We encourage you to hit the subscribe button right now so you can listen to more podcasts of Operation Truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we do want to hear from you, so we encourage you to email us directly at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. I want you to know that your messages are likely to be heard, addressed, and listened to on air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Everyone, this is Lou Palumbo. With me, as always, is my co-host and collaborator, Tom Fuentes. For those who are listening for the first time, give you a little background on Tom. He was a former assistant director of the FBI. His most recent assignment with the FBI was overseeing the entire international operation of the FBI, which I believe encompassed either 60 or 80 countries. It's an enormous amount of countries and responsibility. He'd been involved in organized crime and counterterrorism. You pick it, he was there. And I would like to tell you that if he were there today, we would not have the shenanigans that we have going on in the FBI. Independent of that, we're going to talk a little bit today about the State of the Union, condition of the country. If you're paying attention, you probably noticed that over 300,000 people crossed our borders illegally during the month of December. Since October 1st of this year, over 785,000 people have illegally crossed the border. I'm trying to figure out, as Tom is, and a number of individuals I talk to, regardless of their political affiliation, what exactly is the government up to? Clearly, this does not serve anyone. It doesn't serve the migrants, doesn't serve the American public. I guess it must serve the political element somehow, but I don't understand how it could. We're listening to mayors in major cities across the country complaining about being overburdened financially in particular, and in other ways. And the other ways I'm referring to is their ability to house or accommodate people who are illegal in the country. In addition to our borders, you're looking at the condition of our major cities where corporations are just closing down and moving out, contrary to what you hear from Gavin Newsom, where he tells you California is the place where corporations come to flourish. That just simply is not true. And I don't think Mr. Newsom has any problem with misrepresenting the truth. That's only one example. He talks about energy independence. We are not energy independent. There are about 5 nations that we are depending upon to supply us oil. Not to mention the price of gasoline has gone up almost twice what it was prior to this administration's commencement. Our major cities, you can just operate with impunity and commit as many crimes as you would like, apparently, without consequence, which is an interesting word in the conversation today because the country lacks accountability and consequences. If you look at our foreign policy, don't know what to say. We're involved in 2 proxy wars. A lot of these countries have become emboldened, such as China and Russia and Iran, in carrying out their exploits because they see the weakness in government. You know, sadly, and this applies across the board universally, Father Time catches us all. It has caught Joe Biden. For whatever reason, there's a reluctance on his part, and even his wife, to help him, transition through this phase of his life. Everyone goes through their rite of passage in the passing of the torch, even Mr. Biden. What I find interesting, though, is that he's now participated in activities that have put the security of this nation at grave risk. You don't have to listen to me. Listen to the FBI Director, Christopher Wray, in Senate hearings about 7 months ago, clearly stated that our country's borders are a threat to our national security. That would have been my wake-up call. Apparently, it wasn't for Mayorkas, Biden, Kamala Harris, or even the Attorney General, who is the highest-ranking law enforcement official in the United States. You just don't know where to stop and start. The condition of the country is dire. Look at your economy. They're telling you about Bidenomics. So cheeky, they throw this kind of catchphrase around us. If things got better, go to the grocery store and buy food, buy eggs, 22% higher than they were in 2021. Go buy gasoline. I was paying $1.77. I'm now paying over $3 a gallon, and it was high as $5 a gallon. And right now, this is all smoke and mirrors because we're tapping into our reserve. And you'll probably find this interesting, but we've licensed Iran to sell oil, which is a little bit of a contradiction of agenda because we're trying to address them because of their activity in the Middle East and their behind-the-scenes involvement with the Houthis and Hezbollah and Hamas. but we're somehow rewarding them. This is getting very, I would say, more convoluted than we're used to having. In any case, condition of the country is not good. We're not here to tell you who to vote for. I'm just telling you, try to see the forest for the trees and put down your political lens and try to look at the condition of the country and the direction that this country is going. And it's not for men like myself or Tom, because we're kind of out of the woods. It's for our young people who we have destroyed every institution they need to believe in, whether it's government, the media, our political system in general is a sham. You know, you don't know who to believe or what to believe or when to believe on any given day. We've destroyed the credibility of medicine and science. We've destroyed the credibility of the judicial system because we've now weaponized that because we don't like someone. You know, we have two rather unprecedented exercises going on in states like Colorado and Maine, where they've decided to impose some form of a punitive action against someone that hasn't been formally charged. And by the way, if he had been formally charged, I thought we were entitled to due process under the Constitution. So we've got a lot of little things nagging at us. And at one point, it's going to become the sum of all parts. So, Tom, I want to go to you, first of all, and discuss this. And I don't want to forget January 6th, because you and I spoke off camera before with TJ Stone, the producer, about this issue with this term insurrection that's being thrown around. And I would say misapplied. But I want to start with you, Tom, in regards to what's transpired in Colorado and Maine. And they're suddenly deciding in a somewhat arbitrary and capricious fashion that the front runner of the party of opposition, and I don't mean to laugh, but this is so banana republic, they've decided he should not be on a ballot, and they deprive the right of any voter in that state of making that choice. Tom?
That's just the latest action, Lou, in efforts to go against Trump, everything they can do to get him. So you have these 91 counts in five or six separate prosecutions of him or lawsuits against him. And they were hoping that, and actually the Democrats outsmarted themselves because they could have brought all of these charges 3 years ago. But they decided, no, we're going to wait till the last minute. We'll get him right as the primaries are starting, right as the election is imminent, and we'll get him, and then he won't be able to get elected. Well, that backfired because it didn't occur to the legal geniuses in that party that, you know, these prosecutions, these lawsuits, the defendant's entitled to make motions, discovery motions, other motions that have not come up before. This is the first time we've had an ex-president, and some of the issues that he's raised being prosecuted, that he should have immunity, that people that advised him should have executive exemptions from having to testify against him. They've prosecuted his attorneys, violating attorney-client privilege. That's unbelievable. But in any event, this is something that they thought, we'll get him with these charges. He won't be able to be president. Well, now they screwed themselves because all these motions and trials aren't going to be done or even probably started until after the election in 2024 or later this year in 24. So that won't work. Well, let's try a new angle. Let's try declare him an insurrectionist, from the January 6th protest where millions of people came to the Capitol. And that'll do it. We'll keep him off the ballot because the 18th Amendment, Section 3 in the amendment says if you fought an insurrection against the United States, if you participated in a rebellion against the United States, you cannot run for national office. Well, that amendment was passed in 1868, 3 years after the end of the Civil War. And the reason was that when the Union was put back together and the Southern states got to be part of the Union again, they had very popular figures who were generals in the Confederate Army. And so the amendment was passed basically to prevent them from getting into national office, whether it was Jefferson Davis, their president, or very popular generals, Robert E. Lee and James Longstreet and many of the others. This will keep them from running for office. Well, now, all these years later, you have the Democrat Party saying, we're going to use this, we're not going to have these trials completed in time. Let's try this new tactic that we don't have to worry about whether he's innocent or guilty. If we can keep him off the ballot, we'll win that way. And so they just keep throwing stuff at Trump. And this is yet the latest effort in that, to use the clause in the 14th Amendment. Ironically, 14th Amendment is known as the Due Process Amendment, to make sure that the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, get implemented properly and taken care of. And so you have this effort to use the small clause that was designed to keep Confederate generals from becoming senators or possibly president someday. And now they're going to use that against Trump, keep him off the ballot. That'll be the ultimate. They don't have to cheat in an election. If he's not on the ballot, he can't get elected. So, and then they've already in these states said that not only will we keep him off the ballot, but we will prevent write-in candidates. So he can't even be written in to the vote to get elected. So, you know, the lawsuits were filed last week in December, to try to get the Supreme Court requesting writ of certiorari, which means, Supreme Court, please take this case and take it soon, because, you know, these primaries start in March. And so the ruling in Colorado, the judges there that ruled to keep him off the ballot, basically said, however, we're going to put the decision is going to be stayed or delayed, basically postponed, pending review of the Supreme Court. They're anticipating that for sure the Supreme Court will have to take this case, because you have about 20 other states lined up to do the same thing. So you will have the entire election of 2024 completely in chaos if the Supreme Court doesn't step in and make some decision with this. Now, they could step in and say, if the state wants to take them off the ballot, that's their business, or this is unconstitutional. They can't do this. And ironically, the 14th Amendment, as I mentioned, providing for due process, Trump was denied due process in this. He wasn't prosecuted. He wasn't allowed to argue the case in his favor. They just made this ruling. And now you have the Secretary of State in Maine on her own, without even going to a judge, just saying, I've decided he's an insurrectionist. He can't be on the ballot. My decision personally. So that's being addressed in Maine right now. But again, all of this chaos at the moment can be alleviated very quickly if the Supreme Court takes the case in the next few weeks and says, that's it. You can't do this. You can't take your political enemies off the ballot so they can't get elected.
Let's just take a close look at this word insurrection. And the president, about a week or so ago, accused Donald Trump of insurrection. They caught up with him on one of his multiple vacations. I don't begrudge him anything. And he identified Trump as an insurrectionist. So my question is kind of two-tiered. What defines insurrection, number one, and number two, why wasn't he charged with insurrection? And the reason I suspect he wasn't charged with insurrection is because this really wasn't an insurrection. It was a rather disorderly protest, which, you know, I'm not a proponent of storming the Capitol, although maybe all of our government officials should start to try to listen and pay attention in totality to the American public, even those they may not agree with, and try to hear what they're saying instead of invalidating it. Insurrection would lend itself to some form of a takeover. It wasn't an attempt to take over the Capitol. We breached its borders. Interestingly enough, these buildings belong to the American people. The White House, the Capitol, at one time we could freely go in and out. That's all changed because of security concerns, you know, which are the byproduct of our terrible foreign policies, which is a broad stroke, Democrats and Republicans alike. But I'm trying to figure out where this word insurrection came through. Nobody went into the Capitol armed. Nobody used any level of deadly physical force. Was there a confrontation? Absolutely. But to take over the Capitol, I would suspect that you would need some form of weaponry. Now, I did hear, and of course, we can't really validate the credibility of there were guns brought into Washington. I'm not surprised, because you go anywhere in this country today and your life is in peril half the time, and whether it's a movie theater, a mall, or a learning institution. So they supposedly brought guns in the direction of Washington, D.C. Doesn't necessarily mean they were illegal. But where does this term insurrection come from, and why wasn't he charged? And I suspect it's because this wasn't an insurrection. It was a rather disorderly protest. And I know, Tom, that you are intimately involved in the egregious manner in which those who participated in this alleged insurrection were handled. And guys, I want to say something to you so you were clear about it. We would be saying the same things if these were Republicans conducting themselves in this manner. If the Republicans had been allowing people to indiscriminately access our borders in the numbers in excess of 300,000 for the month of December, Tom and I would be equally critical. We're not talking to you from a political lens. We're telling you because we love this country and we're worried about the young people here. I know I am. I've got a lot of skin in the game. I have 4 young children. I know Tom has grandchildren. Guys, we're losing the country. But I want to go, Tom, and talk a little bit about how the insurrectionists have been handled by our government.
Well, Lou, you have more than 1,000 people have been charged, the FBI investigating individuals, and many of the people charged didn't even go in the Capitol. They came to Washington, they're outside in the fenced area or whatever, pretty much where they were allowed to be. You have the FBI, issuing subpoenas to banks. Tell us everybody that made a charge on their Visa card in D.C. that day, and then use geo tracking on the cell phone, subpoena the cell phone records. Who was there? Who was in the area of the Capitol? And many of them have been charged, even if they didn't even go in the Capitol, even didn't enter the Capitol. But you're right, insurrection as a term was not clearly defined, and what you had there. You don't have an armed rebellion with people coming in with machetes and guns and sticks and stones and you name it, deliver an attack, treating the Capitol like it was the Alamo and trying to go in there and attack people. You don't have that. You have people entering the building. You have them obstructing an operation going on in the Capitol, which was to count the electors and certify the electors from each state that would be then casting the votes of the Electoral College. But you don't have, what most people would define as an insurrection in the first place. And like I said, many of the people that showed up at the Capitol didn't commit any of those things, didn't even go in the building. Now, I have my own theory about this, and I'll just throw my opinion out there, that the reason 1,000 people have been charged, the reason that you have this being elevated verbally to call it an insurrection is the government is sending a message to every one of us. If you don't like the way things are going, don't even think about exercising your First Amendment right of freedom of assembly and free speech, the right to protest. That's out. If you protest, we're going to elevate that what you did was commit an insurrection, and we'll put you in jail maybe 10, 12 years for doing it. And the message for that is because people have talked about some of the states, depending what happens in November, some states might secede from the union. Things are getting really terrible, and a lot of people are upset about it. But the message is, if you're upset about it, don't call your friends and say, let's go to Washington or let's go to our state capitol and protest. You're liable to be talked about as an insurrectionist and then prosecuted. And interestingly, the 1,000+ people and the President of the United States, none were charged with insurrection, using the 14th Amendment section to say they committed insurrection. They're charged with trespassing or damage to property in the building. Some have been charged with assault and battery on police officers. And many, when they went to trial, were denied discovery. They were denied due process, ironically, to see video where the Capitol has 40,000 hours of video of what went on that afternoon. And most of the defendants have not been allowed to see any video, even though Christopher Wray has denied, oh, we didn't have any FBI agents in there. We didn't have any informants. Well, I think the reason they don't want the videos out there, and they've been trying to suppress it for 3 years, is because a neighbor might call in to the media and say, I just saw my next door neighbor in one of those videos wearing MAGA gear, Trump t-shirts and hats. He's an FBI agent. I've known him for 10 years. So he was in the Capitol. He wasn't supporting MAGA. So how many of them were in the Capitol? Informants or actual FBI or DHS agents or other federal agents. And if they're out in the crowd encouraging them, let's go in, the door came open or the windows are open, let's go. And basically you would have, a possible claim of entrapment, that you have government officials talking individuals into going into the Capitol that ordinarily they might not have. They might have said, I'm not going in there. But now you have a big crowd saying, let's go, no problem. And then that's how you get people to commit these crimes. That's why, the laws of entrapment are very strict on that. In the years I had in the FBI, we were always cognizant of how entrapment rules could be used. If you were trying to induce somebody to commit a crime that they might not do on their own, then that's entrapment. And so if there were dozens of FBI agents or informants or others paid for by the government, basically, to induce the crowd to enter the Capitol, that would be entrapment, and they don't want to know it. And that's why I think they're hiding these videos, because they don't want people to see a potential agent in there. So on the one hand, the FBI says, we didn't have anybody in there, but by the way, we don't want you to see the videos to see the people we had in there.
Yeah, but Tom, there are videos floating around, and it's interesting because they're taken from the interior of the Capitol, and they show Capitol Police posted up or in positions rather relaxed. They show people strolling through the Capitol taking pictures.
I know, but those videos, like you see the shaman, being paraded through the Capitol by the police, being escorted by the police, in those videos, they vet those videos and realize, okay, there's no informant or FBI agent in this video, so let's put this one out there. And then as soon as it goes out, he ended up serving over 3 years in prison for doing that. And then he's released. And, but it wasn't because of the video. Well, damn well it was because of the video, that it showed him not breaking down a door or a window or running over the police. He was escorted through. And then when he gets to the Senate chamber, he offers up a prayer to the police, thanking them for their great service. So the idea that this guy's an insurrectionist and he got sentenced to 3 years in prison for that, for basically trespassing. But the message is, I still think the message is to all of us, if you don't like what happens in the future, particularly we have an election coming up this coming November, if you don't like the results of it, you better not even think about protesting it. Don't even think about it, because we'll get you. We'll charge you. You'll go to prison.
What's tragic here, Tom, also is that, and you've used this word before in a number of applications, but there's too much complacency in the country. Enough people are not offended by what happened at the Capitol. And let's be clear, for the knuckleheads that went in there and acted in a disruptive and disrespectful manner, like the guy with the headdress put his feet up on the Speaker of the House's desk, you need to have a talking to. There's no question. I don't know to what extent he broke the law. I don't think he engaged in anything threatening. There was a lot of disrespect. But, this complacency in the country is resonating. And that's why I'm nervous about what's going to happen next November. And again, we're not telling you who to vote for, but I'm looking at the condition of this country in every direction that we turn. And we're in trouble, ladies and gentlemen. And what Tom is speaking to right now deals with your civil rights. And I don't think there's any question that the government overstepped their prosecutions and violated civil rights on quite a number of occasions. But, I don't know what the end game is here. I do know this, that if the American public and people that are listening to this podcast don't become part of a bigger conversation, there's a likelihood we're going to lose this country. It will not be the same country in 4 years or even in 2 years that what you're looking at today. I want to
Lou, I don't think necessarily we're going to lose the country. It's just that we're going to live in a country that closely resembles communist China or the old Soviet Union, that what was experienced by millions of people under communism in a number of countries. And I think that what the government's been trying to do, especially with the COVID rules and regulations that they knew many of them were bogus, but they imposed them anyway on people. And the idea of it is you will comply. What we tell you to do might be totally stupid. It might not be medically sound. It might not be politically sound, but you better go along with what we tell you and comply with our orders or we'll get you. And with the weaponization of Department of Justice, and having FBI beat down people's doors and take, people away in handcuffs and prosecute them, they will get you. You notice they're not doing that with anybody from the Democratic Party or anybody else. All of these directives are being taken against basically conservatives.
Tom, it's incumbent upon the people that live in this country to pull their heads out of their heinies and understand what's going on around them. Or, as I say, the country will not be in the same format it is today. And I'm not a proponent of secession. I think we should bring change about by voting. But states like Texas and Tennessee and Florida and Idaho and New Hampshire and Nevada and Arizona, even in Arizona, where they have a Democrat governor, she's up and down, up in arms hob over this border issue with this Tucson sector. But I think that you could see states step away from the federal government in the conventional sense of which they are attached to them today. Texas could run itself. You can look at Florida. Florida is financially viable. Interestingly enough, they just came out today. They're identifying California as having a $68 billion deficit. And now the governor there, not to go off on a tangent with you guys, but you'll find this amusing, over 700,000 people are now going to be receiving full medical health care. And I only have one question for you. Who's paying for that? That seems to be the end of the day question whenever we address all of these things that deal with this migration issue in general. And I don't want to tangentialize this program today in that regard, but I just think the country, we're talking about the State of the Union. We're in dire straits right now. And unfortunately, between complacency, Tom, that you've pointed out, I use this term, we're distracted. Honestly, most people are just too busy going to work. They're exhausted half the time. They're worried about paying rents or mortgages or educating, feeding, and clothing their children, or any other number of things, their car payments. And unfortunately, we're in a country where we chase the wrong thing, like the generation of cell phone you have, your flat screen TV, your vacations, your cars. It's one thing after the other here. But I think
we do that. We do that because we can control it. I'm in charge. When I go into the electronics store, I can pick out my phone. I can go to the car dealer, and to some extent, pretty soon the electric car is going to be mandatory in a lot of places. But it's a feeling of I have some control over my own life, because in the bigger respect, I don't have any control. And if the government says you will wear a mask, you will get a shot, you will do this, you will do that, you better just comply, because there's not going to be any civil disobedience that you're going to get away with the way things are under the current administration. And I think I don't think it's as much complacency, even if you're well aware that the government is taking the country down a very socialist, if not communist or Marxist path. Even if you know all that and see it with your own eyes, what are you going to do about it? You're going to comply for the most part. Most people are going to comply. They're not going to want to lose their jobs or their family or their freedom, any of that. It's easier, go along to get along. And they'll do that even if they know the truth, even if they know how bad things are getting.
What's interesting, Tom, is that during the Revolutionary War, the British referred to the Americans who were fighting back as insurrectionists. And they were armed, and they were pushing back using these tools, which is why we have a Second Amendment. I know most people don't really understand the significance of the Second Amendment and why they are so hard pressed to disarm you, which they will never do for reasons I pointed out in prior podcasts. But the thing in a nutshell is this next November is our defining moment, and I'm not saying this because I'm a Republican or a Democrat, more because of my appreciation and understanding of a country I've chosen not to take for granted, which many of us are. And we better figure out if you're content with the policies that are in place today regarding your borders. Your foreign policies are just abysmal. I'm going to go to this Ukraine discussion, Tom, because we spoke about it the past few podcasts. I mean, I can't get past the fact that we're sending money to the Ukraine that's being allocated towards pensions and paying civil servants and any number of things that are completely unrelated to the war. And I remind everyone, this is a country that's been mired in corruption. It isn't just Burisma. This is rampant in that country. And I'm going to let Tom remind you of how oppressive Zelensky is with people in opposition of him. But, I don't know how many ways you can offend the sense of decency and intellect of the American public before they get off their rear ends and try to implement some change before we go too far. Someone mentioned today about the Roman Empire. We are living the Roman Empire in an accelerated rate right now, but this country is resilient. It's the most resilient nation in the history of civilization. We have the ability to stop what's going on. And tragically, I don't know what happened to the Democrats. These are not Democrats of John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Tip O'Neill, Ted Kennedy, any number of them that were fairly conservative. Even Bill Clinton wasn't off the rails this bad. But, I hate to say it, we had somebody that was a bartender that we made a public official. You got to tell me about your life journey, your experiences, your knowledge in traveling and meeting people, understanding the heartbeat of this country that qualifies you to have a leadership role. I try not to go off on tangents, even though I tell everyone they all tie into the same thing at the end of this discussion. We're just throwing the future of our young people to the wind, and we should try to do something to stop that. I remind everyone of this. Everything that happens in this country, if there's a terrorist incident, and there's a high likelihood, if you listen to the FBI director or anybody that has a brain in their head, and I prefaced why by simply telling you we're not vetting anyone. We're going to get into that in a minute with Tom, because Tom can tell you better than I can this process that's critically important. We are just in this mode of disseminating information that is inaccurate and untrue. And I can't understand what the end game is here. I understand people wanted to redefine America. I got the memo. We're electing people that are clearly harboring sentiment that is anti-American. You just have to listen to Tlaib and Omar and Cortez and Stacey Abrams and Letitia James and Cori Bush and Maxine Waters. I got it. You're angry. I understand why. We made a load of mistakes. My position is very simple. Show me someone who hasn't made a mistake, and I'm going to listen to them blindly. But in the meantime, why don't we learn from those mistakes, put our head together, and try to figure out how we're going to forge forward. Should be the exercise here. But I want to say something, and this is going to be extremely powerful. It's starting to appear to me as if the Democrats are the enemy of the state, because this agenda that they're driving is going to destroy this country. I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, don't listen to me. Listen to the mayor in New York City, who on a frequent basis reminds everyone that the immigration issue is going to destroy New York City. We now have demonstrations with people that are pro-Palestine. I'm not saying don't be pro-Palestine. I say stay in your lane. Identify your boundaries. You don't have the right to tie up cities in their streets that prevent people from receiving emergency care. Ambulances can't travel down these blocks when you're walking in the middle of the street. Where does it say you are licensed to do that? Where is the character, conviction, or morality attached to these governments? I listen to Adams all the time. Why don't you tell your police department to clear the streets, and anyone that fails to comply, you take them into custody? You can get a permit to peacefully protest. You don't have a permit to shut down a city or its roadways. Guys, and this isn't just New York. This is resonating throughout this country. Every day I turn around, I'm listening to another Democratic elected official, congressman or mayor or governor like Hobbs in Arizona, complaining about the immigration policy. And they're really upset with Abbott in Texas because he's given you a little taste of what he's been experiencing. But the irony here, and I just came to learn this, the region of the country that's most consistently penetrated is the Yuma section in Arizona. And now I'm hearing in San Ysidro in Southern California. What is the end game here, folks? And I'm going to tell you, I don't know if we've got another year of allowing 300,000 people to cross the borders indiscriminately, and let them not lie to you. No one is being vetted. There are no databases. There's no ability to interact with countries of origin, which we don't know where half these people are even coming from unless they volunteer it to you, as to what their activities have been. They're talking about people they're catching on a terrorist watch list. That would lend itself to some form of vetting. You're not vetting people. You're not vetting 10,000 people a day. We do not have the assets to do that. That is a gigantic lie. I don't know how a nice way to say it to you. That is simply not true. More importantly, it is incredibly dangerous. And it's putting the safety of this nation and its citizens and people visiting here legally at risk. What's the end game here, folks? And you know what? Not enough people, I think, listen to this podcast because we're not politically driven. I'm not telling you to vote for it. I'm just telling you, see the forest for the trees, folks. If you think the Democrats are doing you a service with your economy, then vote for them. If you're pleased with this border policy that they've implemented since this man took office, vote for him. If you like the way they pulled out of Afghanistan, and people talk about $85 billion in weaponry, you know what they really did? They threw all those women and all those young girls to the wolves again after they gave them so much promise. That's what they did. Surrendering Bagram is nothing. We surrendered human beings, but we're not offended. And by the way, I know all about offended. I've listened to Donald Trump. I understand he hurt your feelings. I got it. Take a good look at what this president is doing today. He is systematically dismantling your country. And that's so interesting about Joe Biden. He's been a conservative Democrat his entire career up until the point he got sworn in as president. I'm not saying that because I'm picking on Joe. I'm just telling you the truth. He drank that Kool-Aid. I guess he needed this endorsement and he needed this job so bad, before he died that he would do anything to get it and keep it. And that's basically what he's done. Guys, I keep listening to the Republicans who I have grave concern with talk about, the president bribery, and he opened up shell corporations, 20 of them, and these pseudonyms are being used in emails. Try this one on besides. The man's committed treason. The vice president's committed treason. Mayorkas committed treason, and Merrick Garland, our highest-ranking law enforcement official. Do you hear the Republicans reminding you of that on a daily basis? And know this, Tom and I do not find comfort in accusing or labeling our president as a person who committed treason, but that's what's going on here. If you believe letting 300,000 people cross our borders in 1 month is good for this country, then you need a psychiatrist, and you need to pull your head out of your ass. And this is not about politics. If the Republicans were doing this, I'd be on their back. It happens to be the Democrats, but we're on a roll with the Democrats here, folks. This is not the Democrats of John Kennedy or Robert Kennedy or Tip O'Neill, just to mention a few. Even Bill Clinton, who, by the way, nobody's upset with, even though he sexually assaulted our women, right? He was accused of rape by Juanita Broderick. National Organization of Women, could care less. I got it. Donald Trump spoke irreverently. I got the memo on the guy. Hurt your feelings. I'm not saying vote for him. I'm not particularly a fan, to be honest with you. I believe the president should have decorum and dignity and I would say just draw respect. Donald didn't go to finishing school. I understand that. But in the interim, we're losing the country because of your personal animus to this man. And I'm not telling you to vote for him. The real tragic part of this discussion is we are pigeonholed. Let me just tell you something, and I think Tom will affirm this in a moment. So many people are offended and outraged by the way he's being indicted and re-indicted and re-indicted and re-indicted and then denied due process that people are going to vote for him because they're pissed off, not because they want to. You're giving us, this is like the epitome of lesser of evils. We got Joe Biden or Donald Trump. Where are all the good Democrats that are out there? What happened to them? There's a young man that's on Fox every day. His name is Harold Ford, an extremely clear-thinking former congressman, not part of the conversation. Whether you like Amy Klobuchar's politics or not, I hold this woman in high regard. I think she loves this country. I think she's someone who's approachable, that we can hit the middle of the road on these conversations of these issues and compromise. The word compromise has left the discussion today. Would you agree with that, Tom? We're like banging heads every way we can turn and leading the charge. And I haven't even gone off on the media today who are at the root of the problem because they disseminate misinformation on a daily basis to you because they have political loyalties that they should not have. Journalists are supposed to report in an unbiased manner. But Tom, you've heard me go off on this rant before, and I'm going off on it today. And I know you're smiling. I see you, big boy. But am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. But we don't really have a Democrat versus Republican situation. What you have, I think, is the country's being run by the donor class. The donor class tells the uniparty in Washington, Republicans and Democrats, here's what we want. We want this money to go to Ukraine. We want the money to go to the Pentagon. We want money now to go to Israel as well with that, what's going on there. And I think that, you're not going to get much pushback. And the money flow with the Ukraine is a beautiful situation. If you're a member of Congress, Senator Republican, you say, $65 billion now should go to the Ukraine. So we'll give the money to the Pentagon. The Pentagon will give it to the defense contractor industry. The defense contractors will then, through their super PACs, put it back in the senators and congressmen's reelection campaign funding. So the money goes in a great circle, and the U.S. taxpayers are paying for all of this funding to go to the Ukraine. Now, we've talked about that before. And you questioned, how do we know that all this money is going for civilian purposes, paying the government officials of the Ukraine? Well, just last week, you had one of the senior finance ministers of the Ukraine say the U.S. needs to send us $500 million right away. We need that money to pay for pensions, to pay our military officials, to pay for medical care, to pay for all of these government services. $500 million, and basically saying, hey, U.S., you've been paying this for several years. You've been funding our government to the point where people call Ukraine the 51st state of the United States. So keep it up. All of a sudden, there's a delay because some Republicans are realizing they're going to be in big trouble in November because of the border. Therefore, they're going to try to get Biden to do a little more effort to secure the border, and a little, wouldn't take much to even be a little, but to secure the border so that they can tell their voters in November, their constituents, I tried and I supported stronger border control. I supported all of this. And then by tying money to the border, they're trying to basically convince Biden, if you want this money for the Ukraine, you better help us with the border issue. Even if you don't do anything, make it look like you're doing something. The old expression in Washington, when all is said and done, more is usually said than done. And that's what they're looking at here. Make it look like we could tell our voters, oh, we were doing all of this to secure the border, and they weren't, and Biden won't, and Mayorkas won't, and it'll stay the same.
Tom, we're going to close the show for today, but again, this discussion about the Ukraine, to say the least, is disturbing, and because it seems like there's no end in sight. And I keep asking, what is the dollar amount that we're going to say no to? Right now, we're looking at $60 billion for the Ukraine, $14 billion for Israel, and we have to grovel and negotiate to secure our borders. I don't know what to say to anybody listening to this podcast if you ask other people to listen because you might be entertained. We're not trying to entertain you, by the way. We're trying to give you a little bit of what Christmas future is going to look like if we don't stop and change course.
Well, that's why corruption is such an important issue, because you have the wire transfers, the paper transfers of the millions of dollars that have gone to the 10 different LLCs controlled by the Biden family. You have physical evidence of the millions of dollars that went there. And now what you have, and you also had an FBI informant a couple of years ago say there's recordings that the Ukrainians made of conversations, 17 with Hunter and 2 with Joe Biden, where they talk about the payments, the money, and how it's going to, get sent to them. So now what you have on the part of Joe Biden with the $65 billion proposal is just the continuing payback of corruption. That won't stop till he's out, because he doesn't want to be ratted out by Ukrainian officials who have the recordings of conversations with him discussing the corruption. So that's why give him whatever he wants. That's what happens when a corrupt politician gets corrupted. They owe whoever gave them the money. They owe that person or company or entity to pay him back. And that's where Biden's at now. It's just your classic corruption 101. He owes them. And he's been paying them back since he's been president.
And he's been doing it on the backs of the American public.
Oh, absolutely. That's all all political corruption is on the backs of the American public.
We're going to close for today, guys. We're going to be back with our next episode on this podcast. We're going to go back to this discussion about the Ukraine, our borders, the weaponization of our FBI and our judicial system, the complacency that's really, if you guys don't wake up, we're going to have some big problems in 10 months from now. This has been, by the way, guys, you can reach us operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. Please feel free to communicate with Tom and myself. we're not looking for you guys to agree with us. We're trying to engage in a civil conversation with you, something that has kind of left the agenda in this country. All we seem to do is rhetorically cut each other's throats here to no good end. In any case, we'll see you next time, and thank you for joining us today.